Hey dairy traders, welcome back to another video tutorial. So on the previous lesson, we learned about institutional order blocks, which are the most high probability areas to look for some trading opportunities. On today's lesson, we'll be pairing institutional order blocks with imbalances for an added confluence when looking for zones that have a high chance of holding price. An imbalance occurs when there is a gap between the closing price of one candle and the opening price of the next candle, which often occurs after a strong price movement. This gap suggests a potential area where price may retrace and might eventually fill the gap. Now, let's look at these two diagrams here, whereby we have our order blocks here, the bullish order block and the bearish order block. So let's assume that this here is our bullish market structure, whereby price is in an uptrend, creating those higher highs and higher lows. So let's just assume that this is one bit of a pullback, and then right now price has recently created a breakout structure around this area here. Now, after we see that, obviously we're going to identify a bullish order block that's resting somewhere down here. Now, when we are looking at the first candle, because we have three candles here, we're going to look at the first candle, second candle, and the third candle. Now, we're going to make a comparison between the first and the third candle. Now, if the first candle's wick is not touching maybe the third candle's wick, so they form what we call an imbalance. So as you can see here, we have this huge space around this area here, showing us that there were a lot of buyers stepping into the market around this area here in order to significantly push price to the upside. Now, when this imbalance occurs, we need to understand that the only buyers that are participating in the market in order to drive price all the way to the upside around this area here. So there aren't any sellers that are involved in the market within this particular area here, which results into price creating that fair value gap. So in order for price to be fair to the other players within the game, price will have to reverse into that particular imbalance in order to rebalance the price, because do not forget, around this area here only the buyers were involved in driving price to the upside. So price will have to rebalance itself, and hopefully in this case, we would have identified a potential bullish order block in this case. So we would have placed our trade around this area here in order for us to start looking for those buying opportunities in and around that area there. So when price retraces, it retraces with the aim to fill in that imbalance, to rebalance the price, because only the buyers were involved around this area here. So the same is true in terms of these bearish candles here. So let's just assume that price here is bearish, creating those lower lows and lower highs. Obviously, we would identify a bearish order block, a bearish institutional order block after price creates a breakout structure. Now, what actually happens around this area here? So we're going to focus on the first candle. So as you can see, we have three candles even here. We have the first candle, the second candle, and the third candle. So we're going to do a comparison using the first candle and the third candle. Now, as you can see, the wick of this first candle is not touching the wick of the third candle, so which forms what we call a fair value gap or an imbalance. So as you can see around this area here, we have this huge gap in between those two candles. Now, what actually happens here? What happens is that a lot of sellers were stepping into the market, and when there's a lot of selling pressure, obviously we're going to see those big candles. So as you can see, we have this big candle here, which shows us that only the sellers, right? Only the sellers were participating around this area here, and there were no buyers that were participating around this area here. So which gives price more reason to do what? To retrace, right? To retrace and potentially fill in the imbalance. So the main goal in this case is to rebalance price, because there have to be a balanced a balanced balanced players each and every time whenever price moves. So we need to have the buyers and the sellers each and every time. I always mention that, in order for price to push to the upside, there should be some sellers and some buyers that are partaking in the market. That it shouldn't be one-sided. So whenever we see an imbalance, we already know that there is, the game is one-sided. Only a certain portion of players were partaking whenever price was driven to the downside or to the upside. So in this case, price will eventually create that bit of a pullback, hoping to rebalance the price, and then again we're going to be looking for some potential selling opportunities when price reaches the bearish order block there, and then we'll be hoping that price will eventually push to the downside. So now it doesn't discredit the fact that if your order block doesn't have an imbalance, it won't hold the price. No, it's just that whenever we identify an imbalance, it gives us more reason that, or rather some added confidence booster that, okay, price has a high chance of creating that reversal. Because why? We didn't have a balanced price action, right? So I just hope it makes sense there. So when we see an imbalance, it gives us more reason that, oh, okay, price might actually, create that pullback. So which gives us more added confluence that this zone here have a high chance of holding price, which means that if price happens to reverse, we know that, okay, we might get that pullback. So I just hope it makes sense there. So let's head to a live chart and we see on how we can go about implementing these concepts. Now I've picked up a chart on volatility 75 index. So as you know, I normally trade volatility 75 index a lot. So what we are going to do in this case, we are just going to identify areas of supply or demand, institutional areas of supply or demand, and then we're going to pair those zones with what? With an imbalance, and we see on how price eventually reacts from those particular order blocks. So we're going to start off around this area here. So as you can see here, what did we do? We created this high, we created this low, we created a high, we created a low, but we failed to break and close below, and then we created this high, and then we eventually created a breakout structure, which makes this, right, a potential high to look for some selling opportunities from. Do not forget that an order block needs to create what? To create a breakout structure. And we normally look at the zones that are normally resting above the 50% level. So I just hope everything makes sense there. Now we are going to add another confluence. So do not forget, we want to be trading from zones or order blocks that are resting either above or below the 50% level. So in this case, price is already bearish, so which means that we have to look for those selling opportunities from order blocks that are resting above the 50% level. So if we can try and zoom in around that potential order block there, we can already see that we have a lot of imbalance, right? Because if you look at this first candle here and you look at the third candle, as you can see, the wicks are not touching there. They create what we call a fair value gap. And even the second candle here with the third candle here, the fourth candle here, as you can see, their wicks are not touching. They create what we call an imbalance. So even around this area here, as you can see from this candle here, it is not touching the third candle's wick, so it creates what? An imbalance. So which gives us more reason that a lot of sellers, we're partaking in the market around this area here in order to drive price to the downside, which eventually created these imbalances. Now the buyers were not partaking in this case, so price at a later stage will have to do what? Will have to, at least on a minimum, pull back and then fill in those imbalances. So as you can see, eventually price happened to pull back all the way to that particular bearish order block, filling in whatever imbalances that are there within the market. So I just hope everything makes sense there. So let's look at another potential institutional order block. So we go back here. So this is the lowest point. Didn't forget, we eventually create what? We eventually create a breakout structure. What is it that we can do? We can identify an order block. So we do have this bearish order block around this area here. So let me just do this. We do have this bearish order block around this area here. So we need to ask ourselves, this bearish order block is indeed it eventually led to price creating a breakout structure. And then again, we need to ask ourselves, is that order block there resting above the 50% level? Yes, it's resting above the 50% level of that particular price leg. Now, the third confluence would be, does it have an imbalance? Yes, it does have an imbalance around this area here. So as you can see, we have this candle here and this candle here. They created what? They created this bit of a gap around this area here. So let me just use a different color. So they created this bit of a gap around this area here, creating what? Creating an imbalance. So we can work with the assumption that price at a later stage will do what? Will reverse, right? Will reverse in order to fill in what? To fill in the imbalances. So as you can see, even around this area here, we have another imbalance that will have to get filled. So price eventually creates that bit of a pullback, but we barely tap into our bearish order block. So can we still look for potential opportunities? Absolutely not. We can't look for potential selling opportunities if price didn't tap into our points of interest. So I just hope everything makes sense there. And now if we continue, right, if we continue, we can clearly see that price did what? Price significantly pushed to the downside. Did it create any breakout structure? Absolutely not. It didn't create any breakout structure, but we have a bit of a pullback, and then eventually price creates a breakout structure, which gives us this bit of a bearish order block around this area here. So we can still ask ourselves, does this bearish order block have some imbalance? So what I can see is that yes, we do have some imbalance around this area here. So we do have some imbalance around this area here, which might potentially make price to eventually create that pullback, and then we would have what? We would have some selling interest from that particular order block. But as you can see in this case, price just pulled back, right, filled in a bit of imbalance around this area here, but it never really reached our points of interest, right? So we could have looked for some selling opportunities if price had reversed all the way to that bearish order block. Now, after price created this bit of a reversal here, what happened? We eventually pushed to the downside. Now, after pushing to the downside, what happens here? Do not forget, the minimum requirements is that price should create what? That particular order block should lead to a breakout structure. So as you can see, we do have this last buying candle. Price pushed to the downside. Did it create a breakout of structure? Absolutely not. We eventually pulled back, mitigated that order block there, but this particular order block eventually created that breakout structure. So we can identify that bearish order block. It is an institutional order block because it leads to a breakout structure. Now, for an added confluence, we can ask ourselves, is that order block resting above the 50% level? Yes, it is resting above the 50% level. Now, the third confluence now would be, does that particular order block have some bit of an imbalance? So we do have some bit of an imbalance around this area here. So as you can see, the first candle here and the third candles work, so they are not touching. And even around this area here, okay, price here is balanced, but down here we do have some imbalance again, right? We do have some imbalance, which will give price more reason to eventually create that pullback. So as you can see, price eventually created that pullback, and we tapped into that bearish order block, and then we eventually got a reaction to the downside. So now we have recently created what? We recently created another breakout structure. So we look back. Do we have an order block? Yes, we do have that bearish order block. Now we have this last buying candle. So we're going to take that last buying candle. Again, what is it that we're going to ask ourselves? we're going to ask ourselves if that particular order block is resting above the 50% level. So that order block created a breakout structure. That's the first confluence that we look for. Is it resting above the 50% level? Yes, it is currently resting above the 50% level. And then the third confluence that we can look for is, does that particular order block have an imbalance? Yes, it does have an imbalance around this area here. So again, which might potentially give price more reason to create that bit of a pullback and eventually mitigate that particular bearish order block before we see those lower prices, because price right now, it is currently bearish and price is creating those lower lows and lower highs. So the same is true if you were to look for some bullish order blocks. So if we can invert the scaling like this. So as you can see, in this case, you would have your bullish order block. So the concept is the same. You can still look for those institutional order blocks while looking at some bullish structure. So in this case, price is creating higher highs and higher lows. So again, the first confluence would be for what? It would be for you to look for a breakout structure. So that a bullish order block needs to create a breakout structure, and then the second confluence should be, is that a bullish order block resting below the 50% level? Yes, it is resting below the 50% level. So which means that you're going to have some buying interest when price starts trading below the 50% level. Now for your third confluence would be, does that order block have any imbalance? Yes, it does have some imbalance around that area there, which might potentially make price to reverse all the way, tap into that particular order block around this area here, and then we would look for some potential buying opportunities. So I just hope everything makes sense there. And I have recently created a Discord server, so I'll leave a link in the description below to the Discord server, so such that whenever I upload my YouTube content, you stay notified, or you rather get those not necessary notifications way too sooner. And again, that will be it for today's video. If you found this guide helpful, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more trading tips, and drop any questions or topics you would like to see in the comments below. You can click here to watch my recent upload, or click the playlist to watch more content on market structure. Anyway, thanks for watching and happy trading. I'll see you on the next one.